Today we're going to do a preview of the 2026 U.S. Senate elections. That's going to include two special elections in Florida and Ohio. And it's way too early to go into this with any depth, but Democrats are going to need 4 seats if they want to flip that chamber. And you can see the map right here of the states that are going to have elections. So 4 seats is not going to be easy to do unless, of course, there's a blue wave type of environment. So let's take a stroll through these states. First of all, we've got the retirements. And as of now, there's absolutely zero. But this is going to fill in over the next 6 to 12 months. It might only end up being 1 or 2, but more likely it's going to be 5 or more. So let's go down to the list of states here, and not all of them are going to be notable, and not all of them have dedicated Wikipedia pages just yet. So we don't need to look at all these, such as Alabama, Arkansas, Colorado, Delaware. Those are pretty much red or blue states. Now Alaska is a different story. It doesn't have its own page yet, but this could potentially be a dark horse type of race. It's going to be incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan, and if he runs again, he could face former U.S. Rep. Mary Peltola. She flipped that at-large U.S. House seat a couple of years ago, but now she's out of office. She's looking for another job. If the environment shapes up for the Dems, I would expect Peltola to get in and challenge Sullivan. That's if he runs again. So if Democrats are looking to expand the map, this could be a place they might look. Now let's go on to the next state. We've got Florida here, and this is the special election to finish the term of Marco Rubio. We know that Ashley Moody was recently appointed to finish that term, but she's got to stand for election. And given how red the state has become, pretty much all the focus is going to be on the GOP side. So I would guess Moody is going to run. If she doesn't run, there's going to be a few candidates here listed, but I'm not expecting a whole lot of drama here in this seat. The Democrats, they don't have much of a bench in this state. I'm sure they've got to make a serious effort at this seat, as they should, but right now there's not even any potential candidates that are listed here. Jared Moskowitz has declined to run. Over the last couple of elections, this state has really gone from maybe a swing state to not at all a swing state, and this is red territory. Next state, we've got Georgia, and this is going to be Democrat Jon Ossoff running for re-election. He's going to go for his second term. He's young. He pulled off the upset back in 2021, and this purple state does have 2 Democratic U.S. senators. Now, the big name that I covered in a recent video for the Republicans is going to be Governor Brian Kemp. He's term limited out of office right in time for that election. He's also been popular, and it's a competitive state. Kemp could give the Republicans the boost they need to be able to flip that seat. Now, if it's not Kemp, or if the environment is moderately or seriously blue, then this seat could easily stay in the hands of Ossoff. If Kemp doesn't run, it could be any one of these Republicans, and if he does run, I would guess he would clear the field. So this is an absolute must-hold for the Dems. Next state, we've got Iowa. This is not really expected to be a competitive race. Joni Ernst is the incumbent Republican here. There was a little bit of talk about maybe her getting a primary challenge, but my guess is those talks have pretty much fizzled. If it's not Ernst, Republicans have a solid bench here. Now, there was actually one primary poll here not too long ago. Back in December, Joni Ernst was leading someone else 48 to 27. Now, for the Dems, there's not even any potential candidates listed here on Wikipedia. They do have Rob Sand, the state auditor, but the state has just moved too far to the right that it's going to be unlikely Democrats are going to be able to seriously compete for this seat, but you never know what could happen. Next state, we've got Kansas. This one is not expected to be competitive unless Laura Kelly, the incumbent Democratic governor, gets into this race. She's already declined, but she could always change her mind. If she does, I still don't think she'd be favored to win, but that's the best bet for the Dems here to make this seat competitive. Republicans are probably going to have Roger Marshall, but if they don't, they also have their own bench. Next state, Kentucky. This is also a super red state. Nothing to really see here, except we've got incumbent Republican Mitch McConnell. He has not officially announced his retirement, but I would expect he's going to do so at some point. And once he does, again, there's a massive Republican bench here. It could be any one of these candidates. My early guess is that Daniel Cameron might be the front runner. He came up short in the last governor's race, and pretty much any Republican is going to win this seat. Just like in Kansas, though, there's one thing that could have made it a little more interesting, and that would be if Andy Beshear actually ran for this seat. Like in Kansas, I still don't think he would win under most circumstances, but Beshear in the right environment could have at least made this a single-digit type of race. Next state, Louisiana. The incumbent senator here is Republican Bill Cassidy. Now, Cassidy is potentially vulnerable in a GOP primary. He did vote to impeach Donald Trump, and with Trump back in office, I would guess he's going to want to get back at Cassidy for that vote. So there's another loyalty type of test here in this Republican primary. It looks like John Fleming has already declared his candidacy against Cassidy, but again, there's a deep bench in this state. Their best bet might be former Governor John Bell Edwards, but like the other red states, those candidates had success for governor. Just like Larry Hogan in Maryland, the Senate is a totally different story. So we'll see what happens Republicans in this race. Next, how about Maine? This is a seat that Democrats were hoping to flip back in 2020. The polls looked like it might happen, but Susan Collins massively overperformed and they were way off. It looks like Susan Collins is running again. She's been in there a long time now. She's known for her more moderate reputation. So she's in an interesting position because a lot of the Trump base considers her to be a rhino and hostile to his agenda. But the Democrats think she's too friendly to Trump and she's not representing their state well at all. So she's kind of caught between the two sides. So it looks like a lot of people hate her. However, look at her track record. She's had a ton of success. So we'll see if anything happens in that primary. But the Democrats, they do have a bench in this state. It could be Governor Janet Mills. But I would think the better option would be Jared Golden, U.S. Representative from the 2nd District. That's the one that Trump won by almost 10 points. He's also considered moderate from the other side of the aisle. So Democrats might not necessarily be a big fan of him either. But like Collins, I think he could get a decent amount of crossover vote. So Collins here is definitely vulnerable. Next state, New Hampshire. This is likely to be Jeanne Shaheen, the incumbent Democrat. Now I think Shaheen is definitely going to be favored. It might have been competitive if former Governor Chris Sununu ran for this seat, but now that he's out, the only big name on here that is listed is going to be Scott Brown, and he already ran in 2014. He made it really close. He's considered moderate. He was already a senator in Massachusetts. So unless something changes, I think Shaheen is going to be the clear frontrunner. The next state is North Carolina. Like Georgia, this has some very interesting dynamics. This is going to be incumbent Republican Tom Tillis running for a 3rd term. He's had some narrow wins in the past, and he's also potentially vulnerable in a GOP primary. Laura Trump here is listed as a potential candidate. A former candidate for governor, Mark Robinson, he has declined to run. I think that's a great move. I don't think he would stand a chance at this point. So there's some past friction between Tillis and Trump as well. I know some of the base is not a big fan, so we have to see what happens in that primary. But aside from that, we've got action with the Democrats. Looks like Wiley Nickel is going to run for this seat, but on top of that, former governor Roy Cooper, he could actually make a run as well. Now I think regardless of the Democrat, this race should be competitive. In the right circumstances, Cooper could flip it, so could Nickel. If Democrats are looking to control the Senate, this is a seat they're going to have to flip. They've got some hypothetical polling here. Back in November, Roy Cooper led Tillis by 1, and he also led Laura Trump by 2. So like Brian Kemp in Georgia, we're going to have to see if Roy Cooper makes a run for the Senate. Next state, Ohio. This is a special election to fill the remainder of the term vacated by J.D. Vance. We saw Lieutenant Governor John Husted appointed to finish the remainder of that term. But like Ashley Moody in Florida, Husted has to stand for election here in 26. So if we go down here to the potential candidates, there was speculation on who might be appointed, but now that it's Husted, more of the focus in that state is going to be on the open seat for governor next year. Now there's a chance this race could be competitive. Now for the Democrats, they have a little bit of a bench here. They've got former Congressman and candidate for Senate Tim Ryan. He lost to Vance in 22. There's also potentially Sherrod Brown, who just lost to Bernie Moreno back in 24. Both of those guys just lost because the state has moved toward the right. So the stench of defeat combined with the partisan lane does make it seem like it's a very, very uphill climb here for any Democrat. If a blue wave emerges, then there could be some competition here. But for now, we've got to wait and see what happens. Next, South Carolina. Not a lot going on here, but there's some potential that Lindsey Graham could face a primary challenge. Either way, Republicans should at least be moderately favored in this seat. Next, in Texas. This is the John Cornyn seat, and he's running for re-election. But there's talk of a primary challenge from Attorney General Ken Paxton. There's concerns that Cornyn has been a little bit too moderate. So if Cornyn stays in and goes against Paxton in a primary, that's going to be a massive race, and that could have impacts on the general election. Now, there's a hypothetical poll here for that primary, and the last poll shows Ken Paxton leading 42 to 34. Now, there's no potential Democrats listed here yet, but whoever it is would be a significant underdog against John Cornyn. If Ken Paxton were the nominee, though, then this race could be a lot more competitive. So those are most of the competitive races for 26, including some that are just for the primary. And most of the primary competition did look like it was on the Republican side, but you never know what could happen now that there's a new administration. Maybe some of these establishment Democrats do get progressive challengers. So as we go down the list here, maybe Chris Coons could become vulnerable, maybe Dick Durbin. The general election would be safe, but you never know what could happen in a primary given the right type of national environment. Now the other races we did not look way into are going to be in Michigan. That has Gary Peters running for re-election. That's a state that Trump won 2 times. So Republicans are definitely hoping to capitalize on that state. We've also got Nebraska here. That's going to be Pete Ricketts running again. Maybe Dan Osborne runs again as an independent, but I think it would be a much more uphill climb against Ricketts. And maybe look at a state like Montana, maybe New Mexico, but I don't think those are really going to be competitive either in a primary or in the general election. But one other state to point out here that we didn't talk about is going to be all the way at the bottom here. This is going to be Virginia. And right now we're looking at Mark Warner potentially being the incumbent Democrat. But the thing that could make this competitive is if Governor Glenn Youngkin runs for this this seat. He's going to be term limited out of office after this year. Youngkin has been relatively popular, so outside of a blue wave environment, which is possible, Youngkin could make this competitive, and in the right light, he could maybe even flip it. Now, I think a lot would have to go right for that to happen, but it's not at all totally impossible. Without Youngkin, this is likely to be a fairly easy hold for the Dems. So outside of that, there's always bound to be some other kind of a primary challenge we don't see coming. A lot of them end up going nowhere. But I think the big question is going to be, where are the open seats going to be? Who's going to retire? Who's going to run again? There's a lot of question marks on there, but Democrats do have to flip 4 seats. They could pick up 1, maybe 2, but getting 3 and 4 could be a big challenge. Republicans also hoping to go on offense, but I think that's also an uphill climb. You also never know who could resign or die in office before the next election. But other than that, that's a preview of this 2026 Senate election. So let me know in the comments. It's early, but what do you think is going to happen with any of these seats? Who is most vulnerable in a primary and then in the general election? Which senators do you think are most likely to retire? Mitch McConnell is a name that comes to mind. And how many of these seats could actually flip depending on the environment? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.